back to episode 5. I think the topic of today will be, how to set up a lab. Like, how do you get started in doing that? And Joe's going to explain a bunch of stuff. This stuff is pretty high tech. It's pretty amazing.
Okay. Well, Larry, this is actually the most exciting session I think we've done, because this really answers the question: how does someone get started in a career in cybersecurity? And in my opinion, they need a lab, because in order to get into cybersecurity, you fundamentally have to understand the red team and the blue team, the defenders and the attackers. And if you can actually get the hands-on experience of downloading hacking tools and trying to hack from one machine to another, and then defend against it with things like firewalls and that sort of thing, then you fundamentally will grasp the concept. So when you're reading about it in the A+, the Network Plus, Security Plus, you're like, oh, okay, let me try that.
Right.
Because if you can get some hands-on keyboard and actually try things out, that's how you will learn, right? So what do we do today? So today, listeners, what we did is we took 2 computers. We had an Intel NUC, which is a computer about the size of your hand, and running Windows 10. And then we had a iMac sitting next to it. And what we did is we first networked them together with a switch. And the switch actually happened to be a Cisco PIX firewall. But basically, on the Cisco PIX, it handed out an IP address of 10.1.1.2 to the Intel NUC. And it handed out an IP address of 10.1.1.3 to the iMac. Now, at first, these 2 computers did not trust each other. They had firewalls on, so they could not exchange packets. They blocked each other. But then what we did is we disabled the firewall, and then we downloaded a program called Nmap. And Nmap is a port scanner, and it's meant to discover the machines on your network to see if there's any machines that are vulnerable or that you can attack. The Windows machine discovered that the Apple computer had no ports listening. So even though the firewall was disabled, there was no services running on the Mac that would allow it to connect. And that's because the Mac is really designed for security by default. So by default, even with the firewall disabled, the Mac, you still can't really do much to it. So then what we did is we turned on file services, and we then were able to see the files and delete files from the Mac. And then what we did is we then turned things around. We disabled the firewall from the Windows PC, and we created a local user account called Larry. And then we logged into that, and then we were able to delete files on the Windows PC, right?
Right.
And then we even copied files from the Mac over to the Windows PC. So what we did is we basically set up a local area network within 30 minutes, right? Under 30 minutes.
Within 30 minutes. It was just amazing.
And we talked about IP addresses. We talked about port scanning. We did a lot, right? And then ultimately, I think what you really appreciated, correct me if I'm wrong, is how important it is to have a firewall running.
Yeah. That's I actually, with my own eyes, seen the importance of having a firewall and not having your firewall.
Yes, huge, right? And it would have been hard, to grasp that before, how important it was. Because you saw, when we tried to attack it, we couldn't. Like, no. It was stealth. It wasn't even listed. Like, no. It wasn't even showing up, right? And then as soon as we started disabling security, all of a sudden, we were able to get on that thing, right?
Right. So I see the importance of definitely of having your firewall on. So you won't be seen by hackers. So I do. But I know, too, just having a firewall doesn't totally protect you. But that protection with having a firewall is very important.
It is. Now, the next thing, when I was on the Mac and I was trying to attack the PC, I wasn't able to get on the PC unless I had a username and password.
Yes.
Now you understand the importance of having a strong password, because if I guessed password 123, right, which is something a hacker would probably guess, he's on the machine. So, listener, if you, on your home computer, if you have a weak password like password 123 and that sort of thing, you better hope your firewall's on, because if it's not,
then you're going to pretty much get hacked.
Oh yeah.
So I know, I can't remember the exact episode, but one of the episodes you was talking about the most. He's like an engineer, so he goes out and he tries to know you personally to maybe figure out your password.
Yeah, a social engineer.
A social engineer.
That's right. So Kevin Mitnick is one of the most famous social engineers. He wrote a book called The Art of Deception, and he tells his stories of how he, got Motorola to send him a patent because he pretended to be someone at Motorola, and so they went ahead and they sent him some patented information. He talked about how he was able to get information from a bank, and do stuff. So, and he was an interesting cat. You know what he would do? There was a story where when he was growing up, he went through the dumpsters of AT&T. So he went to the AT&T building, went through the trash, and he found a computer manual of how to operate their computers, and he read it. So that way he could actually hack into
their computers,
the phone company. Because they threw out these computer manuals, and he went through, found them, and read them. So that's called, dumpster diving, obviously, but that's actually a legitimate thing that some hackers do, is they will actually go through trash of some companies, and they can get passwords that way. They can get computer manuals. They'll learn quite a bit about how to hack that company by going through their trash.
That is amazing. So that's why you've seen a lot of companies that shred and stuff and stuff like that, so hackers cannot get.
That's right. We also talked about another thing hackers will do is they will put USB drives in the parking lot of a company, and they'll put the virus or the malware on the USB drive, and they hope that the unsuspecting user will pick that USB drive up thinking, oh man, it's a free USB drive. They plug it into their work machine, and now the hacker's on that work machine. Right.
So now the social engineers, and there's probably quite a few of them out there, because I think people may be getting the wrong deception of hackers. They think it's just some guy sitting behind the computer and that's all he's doing. But you actually have the social engineer guys. They'll call you, or they'll maybe try to meet you on the street or something.
That's right.
Just to figure out your password.
One of the most prolific and disturbing forms of social engineering going on is targeting the most vulnerable members of our society right now, our senior citizens. And these are people calling our senior citizens pretending to be Microsoft. And they're saying, hey, this is Microsoft. There's a problem with your computer. Would you like us to help you with that? And so then they direct the senior citizen to go to a website, the hacker's website, www.hackme.com, but it's a legitimate name. The senior citizen goes there, they download the malware onto their machine, and now the hacker from the phone is able to remotely go to their machine and install ransomware and lock that senior citizen computer until they pay them a ransom.
Wow. So I'm going to tell you an instance, and I'm very excited about your answer to this. So I have a friend at work, and she shops on Amazon. She had got a call from a person saying that, we're with Amazon. We're having problems with your credit card. Can we get your credit card number so we can rerun? We're having problems. We're security. And so she gave him her credit card number.
Right.
Over the phone.
Yeah. That's social engineering. And, it's all about tricking someone to believe you're someone other than who you are, right?
Right.
And this is going to continue to be a problem for a very long time until we have a way to identify someone and verify their identity. So the best thing to do in that scenario is to hang up the phone and call Amazon, because that way you're actually speaking to them because you're calling them.
Right. Right. So I think she did do that, and then she had to go and change her passwords, and then she had to go and take her credit card information off of Amazon, so they couldn't, be spending $500 or $600.
That's right.
Off Amazon.
And we were talking before, I think during break, that some things that hackers do is they'll just do like little $5 or $10 fees.
Right.
Because they're hoping you won't notice that in your checking account, and they'll just do that for the rest of your life.
Wow. And there's a lot of people that probably don't even pay attention to that.
It happens all the time.
You know.
As a matter of fact, everyone go and check your bank statement. If you see the little $5 or $10 fees, change your credit card number. And I know that's a hassle, but if you don't recognize those fees, you may have already been hacked, and it could be a hacker just leeching off your account.
Oh wow! So these hackers, they're very cunning.
They are, because they know if they do a big $500 transaction, you're going to notice that, and therefore you're gonna deal with that, right? Mm-hmm. But can you imagine if they did 50 or 500 transactions once a month over time? They don't get caught. Right. So they're very smart.
So who are the most? Who are the people that's most likely to be hacked?
I would say senior citizens, because number one, they didn't grow up with computers. You know what I mean?
Right.
So they're generally not as tech savvy, and therefore they're vulnerable to being taken advantage of. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of them can be more trusting. They don't think someone would do that to them.
Right. They're like, why me? Why would this person want to hack me?
Yeah, I think they're the most vulnerable. I think the next would be kids, because when kids go downloading games, they don't have the tech savvy to recognize that some of those games are actually viruses that they're downloading, and they can be enticed to install things more easily than adults.
Like stuff like when you can do face swaps, and you can make yourself look younger, and just all those type of things.
Yeah. So one thing in the news right now is TikTok. Mm-hmm. The U.S. Army told their soldiers, you're not allowed to install TikTok on your Army-issued phones, because they believe that China is using that to check their locations. So that way they know, okay, this guy's in the Army. Yeah. I see he's in this base. Yeah. And now I see all of a sudden he's on an airplane going to Iraq. They're able to track troop movements with that. So...
interesting.
It's a national security risk. Same thing happened with Fitbit.
Right.
Fitbit was used by a lot of our military, and someone realized they can track the location of all these troops.
With Fitbit?
Because it was basically recording their GPS coordinates and locations.
Wow. So I just bought a Fitbit for my wife for Christmas. So.
Well, good news is the hackers are probably not as concerned with her location. But what they were hoping for is that, military guys would actually start, using those, and they're giving away their location coordinates. Yeah.
That is, wow. That's very interesting. That, right now, I mean, we're getting so innovative, and so all the new things, the gadgets coming out. But as that comes, hackers get more sophisticated, and
absolutely.
And just a simple Fitbit or maybe an iWatch or something like that, they can track exactly where you're at.
Yeah, and then I think was it a week or two ago, people had those. Was it the Nest cameras or the Ring cameras in their home? And so hackers were getting on those because they were not protected with two-factor authentication. So the hacker could get your username or password maybe by sending you a phishing link or guessing your username and password, and now they can see the video inside your house.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I've heard of it. I heard that sometimes the hackers will say weird things or stuff like that.
Yeah, totally. I mean, just for kicks, just for fun. Yeah. But if they didn't if they didn't speak, they could have just sit there and just watched. Creepy.
Very creepy. It's very creepy. And I mean, I know a lot of the computers nowadays, they have the camera on them and stuff like that. So it's probably very important that you definitely, have this thing over your camera, and
that's right.
You don't let anyone know your passwords.
Yeah. So on my cameras, like this one here, I have this little slider here.
Wow. Yep, I've seen that.
So it's like $3 on Amazon, and when you're not using your camera, you cover it. Otherwise, you just use a Band-Aid.
Right.
So definitely cover your cameras when you're not using them. For sure.
Yeah. So all right, now let's dive into this lab. So if I'm just a person like myself, how do I start? What do I need to?
Yeah. So you're gonna need two computers. One is going to be the attacker computer, and one's going to be the defender computer, right?
Right.
And to start off with, I would disable the firewalls, because it's going to be, as a beginning person in computing, to get through a firewall is going to be very difficult.
Right.
So you want to turn off the firewalls. Once you've turned off the firewalls, then you could actually do, all sorts of things. You can download Nmap, which is a port scanner, to check to see which ports are listening. You could download brute force tools to guess passwords. So there's tools that'll sit there and just bang away at your password until it guesses it.
Wow.
So you can download those tools. So you're basically able to simulate the hacking attacks that you're reading about in like the Security Plus book and that sort of thing. So fundamentally, you're going to need two computers. Now, some listeners will be quick to point out, well, what about virtual machines? Yes, you can use, like Amazon has virtual machines, and that way you don't have to really buy a computer. You can just rent one from Amazon for like 20 cents a minute or something. So if you don't have a computer, you can rent one from Amazon.
Oh, that's great. More money for Amazon.
Yeah.
More money for them.
Right.
No, I understand that. Oh, okay. So that's another tool that you can use.
That's right.
In setting up your lab.
Now, one benefit of actually renting a VM from Amazon rather than doing it in your home is if there's a virus downloaded onto the machine, it's in Amazon, not on your machine.
Right.
Not in your home network.
Not in your home network. Right.
And that's a pretty important concept, especially when you're learning on security and stuff and you're downloading things. Mm-hmm. You need to be pretty careful on your home network. So one of the things I recommend in a lab is to have a firewall. And you could buy these from Best Buy for less than $100. And it's basically a small device. We have one sitting in front of us here, right? And there's a network switch in the back with all these kind of ports. And when you plug both computers into it, right, then they're segmented away from your home network. Like this little lab that we built in front of us does not create a threat to the rest of my home network. Right. It's contained here between these two computers. And that way, I'm not at risk of a virus or worm or any kind of problem leaving this lab and spreading to my home network. So if you're gonna get into security, you really want to have a segmented, isolated network that you can do things on without worry of infecting your home PCs, right?
Interesting.
So
yeah, that makes sense. That makes these are things you have to start your.
And just like fundamentally, never use those two machines in your lab for any kind of personal banking. Don't even log into your Gmail or Yahoo account. Don't use any passwords that you normally use, because you need to assume that those machines, because you're going to be downloading all sorts of hacking tools and all sorts of things on those two machines, you're going to have to assume that there's eventually going to be what's called a keystroke logger that's recording your keystrokes that's eventually going to be sent, somewhere, know. And right. So you want to use different sets of passwords. Don't go to any website that you own on there. And that's just a good sort of practice when you're when you're getting into this, always assume that a machine has already been hacked and owned by someone else. Always, the safest thing to do, honestly, would be to wipe the machine and start with a clean installation of Windows when it's not even connected to the internet. Yeah. So, without any internet connection, you load Windows on it, and that way that at least at that point in time, it was secure. Right. Now, once you connect to the internet, and you start downloading files, at that point, like we showed, you can run this program called Process Explorer, and it'll check things in memory against VirusTotal to see if anything running in memory is a known threat according to any of the 70 virus engines. That way you can actually gain some confidence that over time, if there's a threat on the machine.
Wow. Yes, there's a lot of things that Joe has just shown me the kind of to get started, and now he's showing me the precautions. Hey, Larry, you got to pay attention to this and this and this. Yeah. So it's a lot of things, but it can be done.
It can be done, and it's like you said. If you're a professional football player, how did you get there? Well, you practiced, you lifted weights, you disciplined yourself, you spent time, you dedicated time where you said, I'm going to focus on my football career and my practice, and I'm going to say no to everything else during that time, right? So to do this, you basically set up time in the lab. You say, I'm going to focus during this time. I'm not going to get distracted. I'm going to focus, and I'm going to have an objective. When I sit down, my objective is to get from point A to point B, and I'm going to figure that out. And I'm going to read on Wikipedia. I'm going to do YouTube videos. YouTube is an incredible resource.
Okay.
Incredible resource on how to do it. Literally videos. You could sit there on one monitor and watch the video, pause it, do what they're showing. Incredible resource. Absolutely,
So after you get your lab set up and you get, everything that you need, the next step is looking at YouTube videos.
Absolutely. Have an objective. Like, when you search the YouTube, instead of just typing like how to hack, right? Mm-hmm. Have your Security Plus book out, and you're going to be reading a chapter on port scanning, right? And you're going to read about this tool called Nmap. So you're gonna do the YouTube search. Will be like how to use Nmap. Now we used Nmap to do a port scan, right? But when you're first starting out, you're not going to know how to do. So you'll watch the YouTube video how to do a port scan. That will be the search, and you'll know to do that search based on that chapter in your Security Plus book. So every chapter in Security Plus, the certification book that you're going to have, you'll go and do YouTube videos to practice that in your lab. And by the end of that, Larry, I mean, your knowledge will it'll have been like a whole season, a whole preseason of football weight training at the end of that thing. You'll be like,
I'm ready to go.
And you look back and you'll be like, look at what I did.
Right. So, listeners, I've been very, very lucky and blessed. Thank you, Lord, that I have Joe here just telling me all this. And I do have a book at home, How to Learn to Be a Hacker from Joe. Like the basics. Right. So when I start my lab up here, that'll be the first book I actually would start reading. Because now I'm starting to understand some of the terminology. Yeah,
that's right. All right. So we covered, the lab. And that's really, I think, starting off, A+ is going to give you component knowledge on processors, memory, CPU, like 64-bit versus 32-bit, what all that kind of means. Really the fundamentals of the machine itself. The next part is networking. How to connect the two machines together with Ethernet. What is a local area network? What is a wide area network? Internet IP addressing. So they'll teach you about IPs. We talked about during break how there's an IPv4 address space, which has 4 billion IP addresses, and those have largely run out. And so now there's an IPv6 address space, which has billions upon billions upon billions upon billions of addresses that's not going to run out. Right?
No, not for.
And so Network Plus, you'll learn about networking, how computers talk to each other, across cables and across wireless and IP addresses and all that stuff. That's really fundamental. But you first start with the computer, then the networking, and then once you understand that, then you go on to the Security Plus. So that's kind of like the
path.
That's the path, and you can't skip any of that stuff because those are all fundamental concepts you just have to know, right? The certification exam, like passing the exam, is not the important thing. The important thing is the learning process preparing for the exam. Right. The exam is just more like, yeah, you should probably take it. Do you really have to pass it? Not really. It's more like learning and preparing. That's the critical part of it. Whether or not you pass the exam is not as important to me. Right. It's like, did you learn? Did you do the labs and all this sort of thing?
Right. Because because I will be starting school next month. I have, just like Joe said, you start off with your A+. That's like the first, just knowing how a computer works, and because I just listening to Joe and just being in this atmosphere and environment that I am now, I see the knowledge of the hackers. They have knowledge of all this.
Yeah.
And most of them probably don't have their certificates, but they have knowledge of all this, and they practice every day at it.
Yeah, and it's because it's their hobby and their passion. You know what I mean? That's what drives them, right? Because when you're in the lab and the study, you're not making any money, right?
Yeah.
But once you have that body of knowledge, and then you actually have a marketable asset in the job economy that people want once you actually gain that knowledge, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It's just like if you played sports, you know, you start off as a little kid and everybody wants to become professional, but, you know, you go to your practices twice a week and then you have your games on Sunday. And then you move from that to high school where you practice every day. You know, you go through the meat grinder, you have your games, you're excited, and you go from that to college where you're looking at making that big money in professionals.
That's right.
In professional sports. So,
That's right.
So yeah, I mean, it's very interesting. And man, I mean, we're diving into it. I mean, in the last episode, Joe explained to us just what's phishing, what's malwares. And now I can see how all this in building a lab, how all that kind of comes together.
So next episode, Larry, I know you're going to have some things that you're definitely going to want to learn. One of the things I also want to teach you is about the dark web. I want to teach you about it because this is where hackers go to trade code, to download malware, and I want you to see how they get there, so you're able to see the tactics and techniques that the enemy uses.
Wow.
So that you can understand what you're up against and just, you know, kind of see that. So the dark web we'll talk about next time.
That's very interesting.
Very interesting stuff, right? So I'll teach you how to get on the dark web, how to look at there. Now, you know, getting on the dark web is not illegal. Downloading things from the dark web can possibly be illegal depending on what it is you're downloading. So you got to be, you know, pretty careful. So we'll talk about those ethics and we'll talk about those things next time. So
yeah. So hey, wow, we're about to get into some, and we all have heard about the dark web, but hey, we'll save that for episode 6. We're looking forward to it. You guys have a good weekend.
Thank you for listening. See you guys.
See you guys.